A thread by Pat Scopoliti, 28 November 2020, MAGA Analysis, The House That Innocence Built, Part 2. In case you haven't, I do encourage you to read yesterday's thread. Today, we'll focus more deeply on the house itself and the necessary function of innocence in its creation. To comprehend our mission, we need to embrace the command, words matter. We also need to embrace the additional command, logic matters. Interestingly, when you look up the roots of the term logic, you get logos, which has the meanings of both word and reasoning. Allow an example. A dear friend of mine was discussing the laws and practice of face masks and said, I guess it's just the perennial conflict between the rights of the individual and the greater good of the group. Oh, I was so tempted, but I resisted. I did not yield. Work on the logic. That which I was so tempted to retort, but did not, of the statement. The logical term for the fallacy entailed is called a tautology. It means circular reasoning, and circular is a wonderful term for it. The conclusion is assumed within the premise. Can you see it? The trap is set in the one word greater. With that one word, the logic trap establishes the automatic outcome. If the question is between the good of the individual and the good of the group, with the group being greater, there is no question. The very principle of America is that the group subordinates itself to the individual and finds its only goods in that set of things which allow the individual's rights to never be abridged. The very purpose of government is to protect the rights of the weak against the strong. From our Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whose life? Whose liberty? Whose right to pursue happiness? Each and every individual citizen. I charge you, please read our declaration in full yourself, no matter how many times you have read it before. This time, focus solely on yourself as its beneficiary, or, if not you, any given individual you wish, maybe one of your children. What is its personal legacy to you? If your personal rights are to be assured, you must have a single presumption when a wrong has been accused of you. You must have the presumption of innocence. In fact, there is no other way to protect your rights against the powers of the mighty who may attack you. I cannot give you a place in legal doctrine. Others here may, and I'd be deeply grateful if they did, where the very purpose of a court is defined as more to protect the innocent than to convict the guilty. But as I look at General Flynn's case, the principle is obvious. How many guilty people are there in this complete catastrophe, this abomination of law? I won't name the guilty again. Besides, there are countless scores whose names we do not know. Let me shrink the list, though, to two names: Obama, Biden. In America today, there is no chance of convicting either criminal at law. Their safeguards are the essential definition of the DC swamp as empowered by the cabal. For them, there is no risk of guilt. For them, the courts are in place to safeguard their blackguardry. As it is today, not possible to convict such evil actors, we must accept that justice is, if not dead, then dying. For all that, it is not so sacred a mandate to convict wrong as it is to protect innocence. It is the highest calling of law. Mercy trumps punishment. That is not quite right. There are, of course, times when punishment demands the subordination of mercy. I support the death penalty. That is the ultimate extreme where mercy does not trump punishment. I'm looking for something like protect the innocent, weak. The Flynn family calls Sidney Powell their angel of justice. If we're going to get the words and logic of all of this right, I think justice itself is the term we must build up. Let me try below. Justice is, in order, protection for the innocent, weak, and two, punishment for the guilty, strong. Of course, weak people may be both guilty and worthy of punishment, and even so, against the strong, strong people may be right in what they do and worthy of protection. The logic pushes us further. A mob of otherwise weak individuals may become very mighty when facing a single, otherwise strong person. Here, the forces and powers shift and roll. Perhaps we may call for a principle, the hunt for innocence. Researching this morning, I can tell you that Google has swept its search findings to block reference to America's unique role in history on this principle. There is no doubt a long history behind the presumption of innocence. We did not invent it here, but what we did do was create an entire nation and its formal constitution around the principle of protecting the rights of the individual. At that time, no other nation in world history had been founded on an idea, a set of principles, a philosophy, and since, many have followed our suit, but none attain its ideal to the degree we did. We are falling away from that ideal, as again demonstrated by the General Flynn case, and so very much more. The ideal of justice is written into our bones and being. It is not dead yet. As it stands, the ideal of justice is currently dying hard in America. Words and logic demand an additional drop below. We hold these truths to be self evident. Guilt and innocence are truths. Would you attack guilt and innocence with a final blade thrust, kill truth itself? I didn't save the link, but I saw a story about how the Chinese government has led the way in building algorithms that scrub every part of the internet's record of history and thought, theory, and outcome of any and all ideas of freedom. This project progresses apace. As Sidney Powell explains in her book, when the prosecution is licensed to lie, the defendants can never protect their rights. When lies are allowed to one class, disallowed to another, justice dies. Consider again the lies of the prosecution against General Flynn. Let's choose just one of those countless lies to illustrate. We now know that the Logan Act attack against General Flynn was, if not created by Biden, certainly supported by him. This was a complete and utter lie. You likely know, but I'll review it briefly. The Logan Act is a dead law. A law may only live if it is supported by case outcomes. Never once in over 200 years has a successful prosecution been completed by this defunct law. It is a meaningless and useless law. It should be stricken. Biden knows this. If anyone was guilty of breaking this law, it would be John Kerry. He is now a private citizen, but has remained in direct negotiations with our enemies throughout Trump's entire first administration. I hate him, but even I wouldn't argue that he should be tried for this breach. Now, assume it was still an enforceable law. Even then, there is no possible way to argue that Flynn was merely a private citizen at the time of his Kislyak conversation. He was the incoming national security advisor, rightly performing his appointed tasks. Not only was Flynn falsely accused, his acts were both patriotic and successful in the highest degree. He helped avert a serious international crisis. This alone shows his absolute 100% qualification for the job, and his innocence cannot be questioned seriously. The very first judge who ever saw this case should have laughed it out of existence as not passing the smell test. It was beyond frivolous. It was obviously, completely false. And at minimum, the presumption of innocence would assure the clearing of Flynn's name. I guess it's time to talk about Vice President Pence. I have never been happy with his Chris Wallace interviews on the topic and was highly skeptical of him for years following. I have finally accepted his own likely innocence as well. He was a victim, I believe, of the plot against Flynn. The evildoers convinced Pence that Flynn lied. He shouldn't have believed them, but it is at least possibly understandable that he did. I'd have counseled him if I'd had the chance to presume Flynn innocent, but I've accepted Pence's innocence in this gullibility. What is America? As you can see, I say it is the land where the rights of the individual, most especially as captured within the presumption of innocence, are the very basis of our nation itself. America is the house that innocence built. Walk it out. Our greatest right is the right to life. How may one's life be held lost? It cannot rightly be held lost unless the presumption of innocence, having been applied, has been disproved by evidence of guilt beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt. Go again on liberty. How may we incarcerate someone, removing from them their liberty? We must have tried them in a fair court that employed the full presumption of innocence and found that presumption in this case overruled by evidence of guilt. Let's conclude with a turn. Would you destroy guilt or innocence, destroy truth, right? So also would you destroy democracy, destroy the truth of the vote itself? Consider the mandate. Hashtag trust the vote. It demands truth itself to make a vote count true. The nation that is being stolen by the destruction of our vote integrity right now is in fact that house that innocence built. It is the nation where the individual's rights are protected against the tyranny of the mob. Justice itself has been falling for decades. Judges and attorneys for both the prosecution and the defense have joined forces against the innocent and the weak. Infinite resources have been granted to the system of law against the protection of the person. If not dead, justice is, as we have said, dying. All the guidance I have received indicates that the Trump team is absolutely confident in the successful outcome of this election. If so, it will be the courts who safeguard it, and if so, then that justice will not be dead. I am greatly hopeful. I don't mind sharing that I am grim in my fear. The house that innocence built may be torn down by the greater good of the group. The group will never presume the individual innocent whenever the group disagrees with the individual.